Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendar's Astrology Portraits. I'm Lahni DeAmicis, one of the astrologers. This week we're looking at the chart of Maya Gabeira from Rio de Janeiro. You may not know who she is, though she was briefly in the news. Why? Because she just set a new record for a wave ridden by a woman surfer at 73.5 feet. That's like having a building towering over you that's moving and you're trying to stay ahead of it and, not die. It's a remarkable accomplishment. And she is one of the few women large wave riders. And so I had to look at her chart because she had actually set the previous record at 65 feet, but now has set up a new record. And it really is remarkable. Now, I used to surf many, many years ago and actually stopped surfing when I started being an ocean lifeguard, which went on all the way through college. But I do love the sport. And if you've done much, which I never did like she did, obviously, it never gets out of your blood, honestly. And she actually left Brazil at 17 and went to Hawaii. It's an extraordinary thing to put together. And of course, she has sponsors. But what is it about her chart that drew her to do this and keeps her doing it? Well, what's interesting is that, not surprisingly, she is an Aries. Aries is one of the Mars-ruled signs. It's the first sign. It is one of the signs that walks into danger without thinking about it. The two that do that are the Mercury-ruled and the Mars-ruled signs. So you're expecting to see these two signs. And she did an interview when she said, when you're doing this, you're not thinking. You're just reacting. There's no thought going on. And that's very much a martial reaction. Your body takes over. But there's a tremendous amount of planning that goes on to get to that wave. So Mercury has to be strong. And whenever you have great athletes, Jupiter is in the mix. In fact, in great athletes, typically Jupiter and Mars are in the mix. She has Jupiter in Aries, conjunct the Sun, also conjunct her North Node, which means it is her dharmic path. Traveling, physical activity, being brave. She also has Mars in Gemini. So Mars in a Mercury-ruled sign. And that's a fascinating combination that's going on. So you have Mars in Gemini. You have the Sun in Aries. So Mercury and Mars are both players there. And where's the other big player in this? The Moon. The Moon is in Virgo, the other Mercury-ruled sign. So she's someone who very carefully plans this out and is able to tightly control her emotions, which is one of the gifts that the Moon in Virgo gives you. They like working with other people on projects, and yet they're not overly social. In fact, she's a very solitary person. She says she can go days without really having a conversation with a person other than, that's why I'd like my coffee, please, that kind of thing. So she very much is into her inner life. What else are the big players in here? The big players are Mercury and Venus. Venus, because she is, after all, a woman. In fact, she's a very nice-looking woman, and part of her success in her career is she's this tremendously brave young woman, born in 1987, the year of the rabbit, who's very nice-looking, very attractive. She has Mercury and Venus in Pisces, which is funny because Venus in Pisces is the exalted position. The Sun in Aries is the exalted position for the Sun, which means like the best friend in an extrovert way. It means people like helping her. People like being connected to her. But Mercury in Pisces is called the detriment position. It's opposite the ruler position, which means a very deep internal life. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is where the astrology really gets exciting. There's a concept called dispositors. And it means you look at the sign that the planet is in or the body is in, and you track it back to its ruler. Because that ruler has a lot of influence about how that is functioning. Now, when the planet is in rulership, exaltation especially, where it's extrovert, that is the ruler. When it's in exaltation, though, it has a secondary ruler because it's the best friend. It shows who it's related to. It's kind of, this is my buddy and his family is so-and-so. So the sun in Aries goes back to the Mars. The Mars is in Gemini. It goes back to the Mercury. The Mercury is in Pisces. It goes back to Jupiter, the athlete. So Mars, Mercury, Jupiter. So it's all in this group of planets that are, hey, let's walk into situations and see what happens. And it goes back from Mercury in Pisces to Jupiter in Aries, back to Mars again. And so you get what in nature is called a virtuous cycle, a virtuous circle. It's like how water moves in the system. It evaporates, turns into clouds, it comes back down again, it goes into rivers, it evaporates, it goes up. In nature, you have these virtuous circles where one thing feeds another, which feeds another, which feeds another. And that's what's happening in her chart. She has this virtuous circle between Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars. That also ties in the sun because the sun goes back to the Mars too, so they're all looped in together. And it allows her to have this tremendously instinctive, energetic approach to the world. Now, what's interesting is because both the Venus and the sun are exalted, they stand out there kind of like the best friend who shows up at your house and you give them the best seat at the table and you bring out the best food for them. So these two, that Venus and Pisces, which is love of the sea. Remember, Pisces is the fishes. Love of the sea. And the sun in Aries, the person who bravely walks into the fire. These are emblematic in her personality. She shows up on the scene and people recognize this in her. And that's the thing about these extrovert rulers. They're very recognizable. And yet you have this whole cycle going on. And then you have the moon going into the Mercury. And the moon gets tied in the same way. The moon goes into the Mercury, which goes to the Jupiter, which goes to the Mars, which goes to the Mercury, to the Jupiter, to the right. So it ties everything in together. So all these visible planets are all tied into the same loop. What's interesting, too, is she has Saturn and Uranus both in Sagittarius, right? And they're loosely they're actually trying to the sun. Well, when you have Jupiter and Sagittarius, or Uranus and Saturn together, Uranus overturns things. Saturn keeps them stable. So basically, it's a particular generation that says, well, there are no women big wave writers. I should be one. And I'm going to Sagittarius travel to the far ends of the earth so I can do it. They overturn the previous way of approaching it. And that really is something that she has done. So Maya Gabeira, April 10th, 1987, on a Friday. We don't have the time. I did email her and ask her if she knew what time she was born, but she left home at 17, so she may not even know. But it would be nice to update her chart. So based upon that, you can see why she does what she does. So come back and see us next week for another portrait. Come see us on Fridays for the forecast. You, of course, go to planetarycalendar.com or spaceandtime.com to get your calendar and your day planner because you want to know what's going on after all. So thanks for joining us.